Thank you for the time and the opportunity. My name is Yohanes Adianto, and I'm here to present our research with title One City's Three Narrative Decolonizing Colonial Architecture in Surabaya. Mr. Eka Swadiansa collaborate on the composition of this paper. The study explore how Surabaya colonial architecture reflect not one but three different stories, each revealing a unique relationship between political control and local adaptation. Let's get started. The introduction. The VOC or Veranide Oyste in this company took control of this crucial river outlet in 1678, building Fort Belvedere after defeating Mataram forces. By 1740, the VOC had fully authority, transforming the fort from defense to main trading and administration hub, laying the foundation for a new urban order. During the early modern colonial period, Surabaya developed into a European-style metropolis. This grew continued until 1940, marking its evolution into a large modern city. This historical trajectory makes its architectural legacy critical important. For decades, our understanding of Surabaya colonial history was shaped by colonial historians like von Paver, whose documentation established a dominant, unchallenged narrative. This narrative portrays Surabaya colonial architecture as a single homogeneous legacy. Our research challenges this view. We argue that Surabaya architectural history contains three distinctive narratives: three center of power, and three architectural substyle. This is the core of our analysis today. Now we go on the context. To challenge the dominant narrative, we apply two theoretical framework. First, decolonialism. It allows us to view urban development not as neutral progress, but as a political instrument of control and segregation. Spatial planning served colonial interests, reinforcing social division through unequal distribution of services. Second, critical regionalism. This lens critiques from architectural form, shifting focus from visual style to climate, material, and place. It helps us see how architecture can resist universally Western idea and engage with genealogy or local spirit. Let us begin the analysis process we call narrative. This period corresponds to military government under Dendles. Segregation was enforced through city walls and forts around Jembatan Merah. Architecturally, this period produced the Indies Empire style, marked by neoclassical symmetry and monumental column, projecting European authority. However, this style largely ignored the tropical climate and represent colonial arrogance and universalism. Now, let's move to the second narrative. The second period began after the 1870 liberal law and demolition of city walls. The old city became a commercial hub, while new European residential area expanded southward. Major road postwork redefined the urban axis. The architectural shift toward transitional style, reflecting early adaptation. Classical column disappear. Ventilation improved and the local material began to appear. While still European in character, this period marked the first aesthetic opposition to colonial rigidity. The third period began with Gemeente status and instrument modernization in early 20th century. Urban expansion accelerated, adding infrastructure like Tanjung Perak Port, Monokrombangan Airport, and tram lines linking the city from north to south. Architecturally, this period produced the modern colonial style, representing a critical synthesis. Architects trained in Delft began integrating modern design with local wisdom, abandoning symmetry, using sunlight shading structure, and adapting to tropical conditions. This style reflects architectural resistance to European universalism, merging modernity with the local identity. Now we are going deeper to discussion. Our findings reveal a consistent political will across all three periods. The desire for colonial control and segregation. Yet, each era produced different architectural manifestation. Map of Surabaya show how the administrative center shift through time. This is the first time, the first place, the second center, and the third center. But the social political structure remained the same. European districts in the south were better planned, with park, open space, and better infrastructure, while indigenous and the Chinese settlement were left behind. Thus, while colonial political maintained inequality, architecture evolved from enforced universalism through early adaptation to critical synthesis, a gradual blending of Western and local architecture expression. In conclusion, our study reinterpreted Surabaya colonial history by revealing its architectural diversity. We identified three centers of political control and three corresponding substyles in this empire: transitional and modern colonial. This shift show that Surabaya colonial architecture was not uniform, but rather dynamic and adaptive, even under the constraint of colonial power. Local architectural practices involve integrating climate, culture, and identity. This post-colonial perspective reminds us that architectural heritage is not merely a relic of dominance, but also a record of resistance and adaptation, a living dialogue between power, place, and identity. Thank you for attention. I hope this discussion inspire us to see Surabaya architectural heritage not just as a memory of the past, but as evidence of creative resilience within colonial constraint. Thank you so much.